Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a woodcutter, his two children Hansel and Gretel, and their beautiful but cruel stepmother. They led a frugal but happy life until one day suddenly a great famine settled over the land. The woodcutter fretted about how he would feed his family, because his two children were still growing and his living didn't provide enough food. Tossing and turning in bed one night, he voiced his concerns to his wife. Groaning, he said, "What will become of us now, and how will we feed our children when we don't even have enough for ourselves?" Annoyed at her husband's constant griping, the stepmother said, "I'll tell you what, husband. Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them and give each of them one more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find their way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals will soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool," said she, "then we all shall die of hunger, and you may as well plane the planks for our coffins." And she left him no peace until he consented. The two children, who had not been able to sleep because of their hunger, overheard what their stepmother had said to their father. Crying, Gretel exclaimed, "This is all my fault. If I didn't eat so much, maybe stepmother wouldn't hate us so much and want to send us into the forest. Now all is lost." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not distress yourself. I will soon find a way to help us." And when the woodcutter and his wife had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and crept outside. The moon was shining on the white pebbles upon the ground, making them shimmer like coins of silver. Hansel filled his pockets with them before creeping back into the house. When the day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came and woke the two children, saying, "Get up, you sluggards! We are going to the forest to fetch wood." She gave them each a little piece of bread, and said, "There is something for your dinner, but do not eat it all before then, for you will get nothing else." Gretel looked at her piece of bread with fear and apprehension, because although she felt hungry, she knew that if she resisted herself and didn't eat it, her stepmother would be happy. She took the bread under her apron, as Hansel had the pebbles in his pocket. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. When they had walked a short time, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and did so again and again. His father said, "Hansel, why do you keep turning back? What are you looking at? Pay attention and do not fall." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my little white cat, which is sitting up on the roof and wants to say good-bye to me." The wife said, "Fool, that is not your little cat, that is the morning sun shining upon the chimneys." Hansel, however, had not been looking back at the cat, but had been constantly throwing one of the white pebble stones out of his pocket onto the road. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire so you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lighted, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We will go into the forest and cut some wood. We will come and fetch you at the end of the day." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, Hansel ate his piece of bread while Gretel looked at hers forlornly, trying to convince herself that it was more important not to eat the bread so that their stepmother would not hate them. "Why aren't you eating your bread, Gretel?" Hansel asked curiously. "If you're not going to touch it, I may as well have it too." "No!" Gretel exclaimed, jumping up from her seat below a tree. "No! If we eat all the food, then your stepmother will be furious with us, and father will leave us forever. If I can prove to them that we will not eat their food, they will take us back." As they heard the strokes of the wood axe, they believed that their father was near. It was not the axe, however, but a branch which he had fastened to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards. Soon they fell asleep, because they had been sitting there for so long. When at last they awoke, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "How are we to get out of the forest now? Stepmother will never see how good I was at self-control and how considerate I am, and she will never realize that she doesn't have to worry about us eating all the food." But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little until the moon has risen, and then we will soon find the way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles which shone like newly coined silver pieces and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long, and by break of day came once more to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "Naughty children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all." "Stepmother," said Gretel, "look how good I've been. Here is the bread you had given me yesterday. I didn't eat it. Now you won't have to send us away. Aren't you proud of me? I've grown up so." The stepmother snatched the bread and stormed into the house, not even looking at Gretel once. The father, however, rejoiced, for it had cut him to the heart to leave them behind alone. For a fortnight after that, the stepmother said nothing of sending the children away, and Gretel rejoiced at having her plan work. She ate as little as possible every day, and refused to take even an extra piece of bread. One day, however, the children were once again in bed, when they heard their stepmother saying to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have one loaf of bread left, and that is the end. The children must go, or we will all starve. We will have to bring them farther into the woods. That is the only way we can save ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better for you to share the last mouthful with your children." The woman, however, would listen to nothing that he had to say, but scolded and reproached him. Once again Hansel waited until the old folks had gone to sleep again. Then he got up and wanted to go pick pebbles as he had done before. But the door was locked, and he could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his sister and said, "Do not cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. The good God will help us." Early in the morning came the woman, and took the children out of their beds. Their piece of bread was given to them, but it was still smaller than the time before. On the way into the woods, Hansel crumbled his in his pocket, and often stood still and threw a morsel onto the ground. "Hansel, why do you stop and look around?" said the father. "Go on." "I am looking back at my little pigeon, which is sitting on the roof, and wants to say good-bye to me," answered Hansel. "Fool," said the woman, "that is not your little pigeon. That is the morning sun shining on the chimney." Hansel, however, little by little threw all the crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, where they had never been before. Then a great fire was again made, and the mother said, "Just sit there, you children, and when you are tired you may sleep a little. We are going to the forest to cut wood, and in the evening when we are done we will come and fetch you." When it was noon, Gretel gave half her piece of bread to Hansel, who had scattered his by the way, but refused to eat any herself, because she wanted to prove herself to her stepmother. Then they fell asleep and evening passed, but no one came to the poor children. They did not awake until it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, and then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have strewn about, and they will show us our way home again." But the moon came up, and still they could not see the bread-crumbs that would lead them home. Hansel comforted his sister, and said, "Do not fret, Gretel, we will find our way out of here." But they did not find it. They walked the whole night and all the next day too, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest, and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries which grew on the ground. Finally, after days of wandering around, they came into a clearing where a little house sat. And when they approached the little house, they saw that it was built of bread and covered with cakes, but the windows were of clear sugar. "We will set to work on that," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, you can eat some of the window." But Gretel refused to touch the house, for she had to have self-control in order to prove herself worthy and grown up, and eating would only support the fact that she was childish and selfish, and deserved to be abandoned by her folks. Hansel reached up above and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted. Suddenly a soft voice cried from the parlor, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw! Who is nibbling at my little house?" Hansel answered, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating. Suddenly Hansel froze and tumbled to the ground, unconscious. Terrified, Gretel scrambled for the woods, turning in time to see a woman as old as the hills, who supported herself on crutches, come creeping out. The old woman dragged Hansel into the house with a strength unbecoming of her looks, and slammed the door behind her. She was, in reality, a wicked witch, who lay in wait for children, and had only built the little house of bread in order to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she killed it, cooked and ate it, and that was a feast day with her.